In 1935, the world stood on the edge of monumental change. The cities bustled with life, yet beneath the surface, a sense of uncertainty lingered in the air. People hurried through crowded streets, their faces reflecting both hope and anxiety for what the future might hold. The world was still reeling from the aftershocks of the Great War, and everywhere the signs of a society in transition were unmistakable. The air was heavy with foreboding, a quiet before a storm that would reshape nations. Mornings dawned with a strange stillness, as if the cities themselves were holding their breath. The overcast skies seemed to mirror the uncertainty that gripped the hearts of millions, casting long shadows over daily life. People went about their routines, children off to school, shopkeepers opening their doors, workers crowding into factories, yet whispers of unrest traveled from Paris to Shanghai, from Berlin to London. Newspapers carried stories of political upheaval and distant conflicts, fueling conversations in cafes and homes alike. The world felt smaller, more interconnected as news and rumors spread rapidly across continents. Leaders across continents made choices that would soon ignite conflicts. In smoky conference rooms and grand halls, politicians debated the fate of nations, their decisions shaped by ambition, fear, and the lessons of the past. Some sought peace, while others prepared for confrontation. Each move watched closely by allies and rivals. The international stage was complex, with alliances and tensions simmering beneath the surface. Old friendships were tested, new pacts were forged, and the boundaries of nations seemed ever more fragile. The world order was in flux, and every diplomatic gesture carried the weight of potential catastrophe. Nations were still recovering from World War I, its scars fresh across Europe and beyond. Cities bore the marks of destruction, and families mourned, lost, loved ones. Veterans struggled to find their place in a changed society, while communities worked to rebuild what had been shattered. The memory of war was a constant presence, shaping hopes and fears for the future. Economic struggles persisted, fueling discontent and radical ideologies. The Great Depression had left millions unemployed and desperate, standing in breadlines or searching for work. In this climate of hardship, extremist movements gained traction, promising solutions to those who felt abandoned by traditional politics. The seeds of unrest were sown in the fertile ground of economic despair. The League of Nations, created to prevent another global war, struggled to maintain peace. Delegates gathered in Geneva, debating resolutions and issuing warnings, but their words often rang hollow. The organization lacked the power to enforce its decisions, and its authority was challenged at every turn. Its efforts seemed futile against the backdrop of growing militarism and nationalist fervor. Across Europe and Asia, armies marched and flags waved as leaders rallied their people with promises of strength and renewal. The drums of war grew louder, drowning out calls for diplomacy and restraint. As 1936 approached, the sense of impending conflict was palpable. Headlines warned of crises and confrontations while families gathered around radios, straining to catch the latest news. In the streets, anxiety was etched on every face as the world braced itself for the storm that was about to break. 1935 marked a turning point in the history of the 20th century, a year when the world seemed to hold its breath as the winds of change swept across continents. The echoes of the Great War still lingered, but new storms were gathering on the horizon, threatening to plunge nations into fresh turmoil. As tensions rose sharply across the globe, headlines screamed of unrest and uncertainty. People everywhere sensed that the fragile peace established after World War I was beginning to unravel. In cities from London to Shanghai, anxious crowds gathered around newspaper stands, reading about protests, political upheavals, and the ominous movements of armies. In Europe, Hitler's Germany gained momentum, strengthening its grip on power with each passing month. The Nazi regime's propaganda machine worked tirelessly, rallying the masses and fueling a sense of national revival. Hitler's fiery speeches drew enormous crowds, and his promises of restoring German pride resonated deeply with a population still reeling from economic hardship and humiliation. The Treaty of Versailles, once seen as a guarantee of peace, was increasingly viewed by Hitler as an obstacle to be dismantled. He openly challenged its restrictions, denouncing the treaty as unjust and vowing to restore Germany's former glory. The world watched with growing alarm as Hitler began rearming the nation, openly violating the treaty's terms. German factories buzzed with activity, producing weapons and military equipment at a pace not seen since the war. Soldiers marched through the streets in new uniforms, a clear sign that Germany was preparing for something far greater than mere defense. Meanwhile, Mussolini's Italy grew more aggressive, setting its sights on Ethiopia in a bid to expand its empire. Italian troops mobilized, and the world braced for another colonial conflict. Mussolini's ambitions threatened to destabilize Africa and further strain international relations. In Asia, Japan flexed its military muscles, pursuing regional dominance with increasing boldness. Japanese forces paraded through the streets, signaling their intent to expand their influence across East Asia. The world watched as Japan's ambitions grew, raising fears of conflict in the Pacific. The Soviet Union, under Stalin's watchful eye, observed these developments with caution. Soviet leaders gathered in the Kremlin, acutely aware that the balance of power was shifting. They prepared for the possibility of looming conflicts, wary of the ambitions of their neighbors. As the year ended, the world teetered on the edge of a new era. Flashpoints emerged across Europe and Asia, and the sense of unease grew ever more palpable. Ordinary people, caught in the crosscurrents of history, wondered what the future would bring. The actions of powerful leaders left a trail of unease, setting the stage for a tumultuous period. The decisions made in 1935 would echo for years to come, shaping the destiny of nations and the lives of millions. The world stood at a crossroads, uncertain and anxious, as the shadow of conflict loomed ever larger. In October 1935, Italy invaded Ethiopia, escalating global tensions. Emperor Haile Selassie's appeal to the League of Nations fell on deaf ears. The League's inability to respond effectively signaled that aggression might go unchecked. Italian forces used modern weaponry against an ill-prepared Ethiopian army. Economic sanctions on Italy were weak and failed to deter Mussolini. The League's failure would have far-reaching consequences. For Ethiopians, the invasion was devastating, towns razed, civilians suffering. The world's inaction sent a chilling message. Small nations could fall with little recourse. The Italian invasion set a grim precedent, emboldening future dictators. In 1935, Germany made bold moves, defying international norms. Hitler enacted the Nuremberg Laws, institutionalizing racial discrimination against Jews. These laws stripped Jews of citizenship and rights, heralding a dark era. Simultaneously, Germany rearmed rapidly, openly flouting Versailles restrictions. Hitler expanded the military and introduced conscription, aiming to restore German might. European leaders hesitated to confront Germany, fearing another war. Diplomatic efforts failed, leaving Hitler emboldened. The atmosphere in Germany grew tense as the world braced for the consequences. The mid-1930s were marked by critical diplomatic failures. The League of Nations proved ineffective against rising aggression. Its failure to address Ethiopia and Germany's rearmament exposed deep weaknesses. Britain and France, wary of conflict, adopted appeasement. This emboldened dictators to pursue ambitions unchecked. In Asia, Japan's expansionism shifted alliances and raised concerns. The inability to present a united front further exacerbated tensions. Hopes for peace faded as leaders wrestled with indecision and missed opportunities. As 1936 unfolded, tensions escalated across continents. Hitler's Germany defied the international community, remilitarizing the Rhineland. This act emboldened the Nazi regime and undermined collective security. European powers, wary of war, failed to respond, giving Germany a green light. In Asia, Japan's aggression heightened tensions with China. The Soviet Union watched closely, aware its security was at risk. Ordinary citizens grappled with the realities of a world moving toward conflict. The flames of war spread, and the world was ill-prepared for what lay ahead. In March 1936, Hitler remilitarized the Rhineland, altering history's course. By sending troops into this strategic region, he violated the Treaty of Versailles and the Locarno Treaties. France and Britain, shocked and indecisive, chose not to confront Germany. This emboldened Hitler, confirming the West's reluctance to oppose him. The balance of power in Europe shifted, paving the way for further aggression. For Germans, it was a moment of national pride. For neighbors, a source of fear. The move exposed the weaknesses of appeasement and diplomacy. It set the stage for future Nazi expansions. The world watched, but few acted. As tensions escalated in 1935 and 1936, the emotional toll on ordinary people was profound. Across Europe, families faced fear and uncertainty as instability threatened their lives. In Germany, oppressive policies against Jews and minorities tore communities apart. In Ethiopia, the Italian invasion brought devastation and despair. The lack of international intervention left Ethiopians feeling abandoned. In Asia, Japanese expansionism cast a shadow over the region. Despite the maneuvers of leaders, ordinary citizens bore the brunt of these turbulent times. The human cost of political decisions became increasingly apparent as the world edged closer to war. As we look back on the years 1935 and 1936, it becomes clear that these were not just ordinary years in history. Instead, they marked a turning point, a period when the world, still recovering from the devastation of the First World War, began to slide inexorably toward another even more catastrophic conflict. The events of these years, though perhaps not fully understood at the time, set the stage for the global upheaval that would soon follow. Across continents, tensions simmered and alliances shifted as nations grappled with uncertainty and fear. Diplomatic efforts, once seen as the hope for lasting peace, faltered again and again. The League of Nations, established to prevent another world war, found itself powerless in the face of growing aggression. At international summits, leaders exchanged uneasy glances and tense words, but their agreements often proved hollow. Meanwhile, charismatic and ruthless dictators rose to power, their fiery speeches echoing through crowded halls and over radio waves, stirring both fear and fervor among their people. The rise of totalitarian regimes, most notably in Germany, Italy, and the Soviet Union, transformed the political landscape of Europe and beyond. These leaders, driven by ambition and ideology, pursued aggressive policies that challenged the fragile peace established after World War I. Their unchecked actions exposed the deep flaws and weaknesses in the international order as fascist rallies and military parades became common sights and more countries fell under authoritarian rule. In 1936, the world watched as German troops marched boldly into the Rhineland, violating treaties and daring the world to respond. At the same time, Italian forces invaded Ethiopia, unleashing violence and suffering on a massive scale. The League of Nations, meant to be a guardian of peace, issued condemnations but failed to act decisively. These moments revealed the dangers of appeasement. When aggression goes unchallenged, it only grows bolder. For ordinary people, the consequences were deeply personal and immediate. Families across Europe and beyond lived in fear, uncertain of what the future would bring. Refugees fled their homes, seeking safety from violence and persecution. Newspapers carried grim headlines, and the anxiety of the era seeped into daily life, affecting millions who simply wanted peace and security. The decisions made by political leaders during these pivotal years would have far-reaching consequences. Treaties were signed and broken, alliances formed and dissolved, and every choice seemed to carry the weight of history. The world watched and waited, as the actions of a few shaped the destinies of millions, altering the course of history in ways that could not yet be imagined. Yet even in these dark times there were voices calling for peace and unity. International protests and peace rallies showed that many people still believed in the possibility of a better world. Debates in the League of Nations and conversations among ordinary citizens reflected a deep desire to avoid another devastating war. The lessons of this period remind us of the importance of vigilance, collective action, and the courage to stand up against injustice. Ultimately, the choices made during these critical years set the world on an irreversible path toward World War II. When war finally broke out in 1939, it was the culmination of years of missed opportunities, failed diplomacy, and unchecked aggression. The conflict that followed would reshape the world, leaving lessons that still resonate today, a stark reminder of the consequences when peace is taken for granted.